So welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. And before we get started here, just if you collect comic books, if you like hearing someone rant about comic books every day, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Greatly appreciate that. But getting to the comics today, I wanted to talk sort of Venom and Carnage key issues. And the reason being that we're sort of in between the two, or the first Venom movie and then the Venom Carnage movie that will be coming out in a year or two. So I think right now is a good time to kind of think about a strategy going into that next movie. So, you know, Venom and Carnage, they seem to have a sort of a hardcore cult following, I would say, for a lot of these key issues, and that means there's going to be some collectors out there that have, you know, maybe 3 Amazing Spider-Man 300s and a couple First Carnages and a couple Amazing Spider-Man 316s as well. So, you know, maybe going into this movie you can start thinking about a plan or a strategy to possibly sell some for more than you paid for them. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about, not necessarily that I'm for sure going to sell, but it's always good to think about a strategy, you know, going into like these big pop culture events and movies. So yeah, just let's kind of look at each issue. I would say, you know, they're so collectible, all these key issues from, you know, mostly from the Todd McFarlane era. And I would say the main one issue for an investment, though, if you're really serious about sort of investing in comics, is going to be Amazing Spider-Man 300. As, you know, a lot of people know, this is one of the most expensive issues that you can buy in a CGC 9.8. And the reason for that being is it's very rare in a 9.8. So the 9.8 ratio on this comic book, so out of all graded copies, only 6% are 9.8s. And even some of those would be not white pages. This one being white pages, some of those would be off-white to white. Now on the census altogether there's 940 of these in the blue label. And again, some of those not being white pages, so probably about 1 of 900 item you're getting here. And you know, for like first appearance of Venom, for how popular this issue is, that's not very many issues. To be, you know, 1 of 900 is not a lot of issues for such a popular character. So yeah, you know, 6% of all CGC copies are 9.8s, plus, you know, under 1,000 copies of these. So for both of those reasons, yeah, this book, I just saw one sell last week in an auction, sort of a fire sale weekly auction, and it sold for $1,900 US. And that's a pretty good low price, actually. That issue wasn't perfect. It wasn't 9.8 white pages, but kind of had some centering issues on the side. So I've seen these go in sort of a fire sale auction for basically $2,000. They're really reliably selling for $2,500. And if you got one that like really pops with colors and is very centered, some people are even willing to pay like $2,500 or over for those. And this one, yeah, is a really good example. I got pretty lucky. If you have a chance to check out my other videos on Amazing Spider-Man 300, I did overpay for this issue quite a bit, but was pretty lucky just in the fact that the colors are great. They pop so good, and you know, nicely centered. You know, no pages you could see on the side here. It's basically you just see the cover really flat and perfectly crisp and everything. So kind of got lucky that way. But yeah, if you're seriously thinking about collecting and investing, this is probably the issue that you want to look at. But let's take a look at some of the other issues, because they're all equally cool. So Amazing Spider-Man 361, First Carnage. This one's in the direct edition here. All these come in the newsstand edition too, which it's kind of a cool like niche collecting thing that you can do, is buy these in the newsstand versions. And generally they'll go for, yeah, maybe about 10% more than these direct editions in the 9.8 white pages. But first Carnage here, first full appearance of Carnage. And yeah, well, I'll talk about all 3 of these books sort of leading into the movie and maybe getting into a bit of a strategy going into the movie. But just on the CGC census, it's 27% of all copies are 9.8s, And in this book, there's 2,915 of them in the blue label. So a lot of these books out there. And yeah, this one made in 1992. So that was really like the peak of, I would say, the comic book printing and the comic book bubble. So there's going to be a lot of these issues out there. But that's somewhat reflected in the price. You know, these, I know last year when the Venom trailer was coming out and sort of the Venom movie was out, you know, these were selling for about $500 US, and now I'm kind of seeing them more closer to that $400 US, and this is in the direct edition. Yeah, every now and then you'll see like a newsstand edition, and that's probably going for about $500. But they've come off maybe $50 to $100 in the 9.8 white pages from the first Venom movie. So yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 361, so collectible. First Carnage. It's one of those where, you know, on the census it doesn't look very good. There's so many copies, but you know, there's just a rabid cult following out there, and there's always a lot of these that you can find. So it's just one of those really collectible issues, I would say. And you know, not cheap, but yeah, I mean, if you can't go for the 9.8s, you know, a rough copy would certainly be a good addition to a collection. And you know, usually for when I recommend you know, getting into comic collecting and stuff, in the 90s, if you're buying CGC comics, I would pretty much just buy 9.8s, and if budget doesn't permit that, then go for like ungraded raw comics. I personally wouldn't really buy like 9.4s or 9.2s of like any of these issues. Maybe 300, but you know, if you can't get a 9.8, you can't afford it, I would just buy like a nice rough copy. Last issue here is Amazing Spider-Man 316, one of my favorite issues from when I was a kid. First Venom cover, and just a really awesome collectible cover. You know, these two being Todd McFarlane art. Yeah, when these came out in the 80s, and you know, Todd McFarlane, it was such a new way of doing art, and so detailed, and it looked so fresh and new at the time, and which is why Todd McFarlane is so popular. But you know, these are really iconic issues, and yeah, this one too you can pick up for even cheaper than the first appearance of Carnage. So this, yeah, pretty good deal, I would say. This is kind of in, I say, sort of the bread and butter of kind of investment grade CGC comics as far as price wise. Generally you could find one of these for like maybe $280 to $300 American in the 9.8 white pages. If you're getting a good deal, you know, buy it now is get into like $350, maybe $400 would be like the highest buy it now. I don't think I've seen one sell for $400. But yeah, in the direct edition, under $300 for 9.8 316, not a bad deal at all. So collectible. When you want to sell it on the way out, it'll probably sell really quick around, you know, the price you paid for it. And if you wait a couple years or, you know, 5-10 years, it'll hopefully appreciate as well. And on the census, it's 29% of all CGC graded copies are 9.8s. So not the best favorable ratio. Like obviously 306%. This one 29%. There's what is it, 785 9.8s out there. So yeah, just numbers wise, there's a lot less of these than first appearance of Carnage, which was pretty surprising actually. But yeah, I guess Carnage must really have like a huge cult following as well. Yeah, like I was really surprised that this and this comic in 9.8s, there's still more 9.8 316s than both of these put together. So that was pretty surprising actually. I didn't realize there were so many 361s. So yeah, because it's a little bit more rare in the 9.8s, I think this is a really good buy. You know, if you could pick this up for like $280 American, even less if you find like the greatest deal ever, that I think would be a really good buy. Now, yeah, so we got into the CGC census a bit. I think just kind of bringing it all together, we're in between two Venom movies right now. Obviously, last year, the first Venom movie came out, kind of bombed at the box office, sort of. I think it did okay, but definitely not like a screaming success. I liked the movie. It was pretty good. I thought it, you know, the first 30 minutes was pretty slow, but then it sort of got into it, and you know, the visual effects with the symbiote were really cool, and I wasn't too like disappointed by it or anything, but it didn't blow me away. But I mean, like, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, Eddie Brock goes to a prison to like speak with someone about, he's a reporter, and the person he goes to speak with is like crazy Cletus Cassidy, which is played by Woody Harrelson too. So I think this next movie could be a little bit bigger than the first movie. And so yeah, how going into that movie can you position yourself if you are a Venom and Carnage collector? Maybe you have a couple issues on hand already. How would you go about positioning yourself going into that? Now, personally, I would think if you have multiple copies of each issue, maybe even the rough copies, I would personally sort of pick and choose a few issues that you maybe can sell. How I would probably do it is, maybe a week after the trailer comes, that could be a pretty good opportunity to maybe throw them up on eBay as a buy it now, at that sort of, maybe 50 or $100 more than you paid for it. And I think, yeah, right now is actually a pretty decent time, I think, to buy. No really Venom and Carnage hype. I would say the hype right now around superheroes is pretty much like Batman, the Joker, and Avengers. Avengers Endgame obviously just be coming out. So yeah, the Venom hype that was up last year has certainly calmed down. So I think you can definitely look for really good deals on these 3 comic books, these 3 comic keys that sell really well. They're so collectible. And yeah, possibly a week after the trailer comes out for the Venom Carnage movie, think about throwing up, a couple issues and, trying to make a couple $100. I think that would be a decent strategy. For me, so I have these 3 9 point. I just have one of each in the 9.8s. I kind of do want another 316 because usually the comics that I have like a nostalgic connection to, I like to kind of have 2 of when all the comics that I really liked when I was a kid. So yeah, I might look for an Amazing Spider-Man 316 in the 9.8s, another one. But I do have some rough copies of these comics that are in general like they're near mint, like 9.2s, 9.4s. I have 2 Amazing Spider-Man 300s in the newsstand version. Just ungraded copies. They're both very fine, so they got some nicks in them. But I think sort of using that strategy I just let you know about a week after the trailer-ish, I think I'm going to maybe throw up some auctions and probably sell most of my rough ungraded copies of the Venom and Carnage keys. And yeah, I bought those comics last year. Some of them were like a little bit before the trailer for the Venom movie came out. Some of them were at my a local Comic Con, and I thought I got a pretty decent price on those. Even though, I mean, for me, just being in Canada, to be able to pick up comics at a local Comic Con without shipping them over or anything, like that was a big plus for me. Because a lot of times it's gonna cost you like 10 or 20% on what you bought just to like get them over the border and ship them here if it comes from the U.S. So yeah, I think what my strategy is going into next year's Venom Carnage movie, and I think it's coming out next year. It might be maybe like early in 2021, I guess it would be. But I'm pretty sure it's slated for next year. And yeah, so going in, I think I'm just gonna wait for the trailer. Just because I'm on Twitter and stuff, you can kind of feel, like, obviously I'll know probably the day of when the trailer comes out. And yeah, give it maybe a week for the hype to just build and for some people to think about what they want to do and maybe throw up my ungraded key issues from this era. Because yeah, I have 2 Carnage 361s ungraded. They're both, I would say they're about a 9.2, 9.4 each of them. I got a nice 316 ungraded, that's probably about a 9.2 for same deal. And then again, yeah, the 2 300s very fine. I might throw those up, next year and sell them all. Probably keep the CGC 9.8s and yeah, just, I'm kind of like a long-term comic investor, I would say. My plan for most of these like super rare 9.8s that I've kind of paid up for is just to hold on to them for like 10 or 20 years. And you know, when I'm kind of old, I can maybe sell them online on an eBay store or something for something to do when I'm a little bit older. But yeah, just it's a good case study for just in general about the comic book market, because yeah, when these movies come out, and I think it's more pronounced for like sort of more obscure character movies, like, you know, the fact that like a Spiderman movie's coming out, and even Avengers now, it's quite outplayed. All the characters have, you know, been in the Marvel comic universe for like 5 years now or even longer, so, you know, it's not like someone saw Avengers Endgame and just ran out and bought Iron Man comics or anything like that. But you know, Deadpool comes to mind. I mean, you know, New Mutants 98 was not a very popular comic until that Deadpool movie came out and just blew up. Harley Quinn comes to mind, and yeah, Venom and Carnage could sort of be in that boat. Although last year the movie came out, I don't think it was as big of a success of it as they would have wanted to. But I still thought it was a good movie, and yes, during that time there were some inflated prices, and I actually was on the other end of a deal where I pretty much paid up for this one. And you can check out my video of that on the channel. It's like kind of like the third video I did, so I kind of stumbled through my experience buying my Amazing Spider-Man 300, overpaying for it a little bit. Yeah, so going into the movie next year, I probably will sell my rough copies. So I think it's just a good idea to see what you got. If you're a Venom and Carnage fan and you do already have the issues, that's great. You can kind of be strategic in your thinking. If you don't have very many issues, maybe now is actually a pretty good time to pick up some. You know, look out for those like 1 week auctions. You know, have your search results, and you can get eBay to kind of send you an email every time like a new search result might come up, or like a new listing in that search result come up, so that works sometimes too. You know, and I think if you're diligent and you're patient, then you can find like really good deals on these books. And, you know, especially Amazing Spider-Man 361, because there's so many of them out there, I think you'll probably be able to, like, there's probably a lot. I haven't looked on eBay today or anything, but I'm assuming there's like 4 or 5 on eBay in the 9.8s. So yeah, I think right now we're in a bit of a lull. You can look for really good deals on these books, and hopefully make a couple $100 on the way out. And the whole time you know, you've owned these books, you have the pride of ownership, and you kind of own them for free. And that's, you know, sort of my philosophy is, you know, I don't really want to make money investing in comics or anything, but I like that idea of buying these comics and holding them and having like the pride of ownership for all these years, and then on the way out you could sell them and it pretty much cost you nothing almost. And if you're lucky, maybe you make like a couple $100, but if not, you sell them for about the same you paid, and you've had like 10 years or whatever it is of ownership, which is like worth more than $100 or whatever it might be, right? So yeah, that's my philosophy and my kind of strategy going into next year's Venom Carnage movie. I'll definitely be seeing it like first day, and I'll probably do a review for the channel, or definitely do a review for the channel for sure. So yeah, that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching. Yeah, I got so much more in my collection here, many more movie ideas. So if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next video.